Hi, and welcome to the Renewable Roundup podcast from Schneider Electric. Once again, I'm Russell Redding, Head of Energy Markets at Zygo. Every week, I'm going to bring you some top stories, some critical climate topics, insights, and expert voices. So please hit subscribe so you don't miss a thing. This week, I am very, very excited that I'm joined by Dr. Calum McDonald, the Business Director of the Point and Sandwick Trust, who's going to talk to me about the UK's biggest community wind farm. I'm a huge advocate of community projects, and this is a project I have known for many years, and that's why I'm really excited to have Calum here as a guest. Please listen on and find out why. Hi Calum, thanks very much for joining me. How are you today?
Very much for the invitation.
Excellent. No, I'm really pleased. As I'm sure you know, I'm really excited to talk to you today because the Point and Sandwick Trust is absolutely one of my favourite projects anywhere in the UK because it's a community project. But before we get into all of that, for the listeners, would you just like to quickly introduce yourself and what you do? I know that you were, if I'm right, you were the MP for the Western Isles for a number of years, and you were in the government in the 90s, and you were very qualified. So, do you want to just give an overview about yourself before we get started?
Yeah, I was, as you say, an MP for about 18 years, from 97 to 2005. I was a Labour MP. I was in opposition, first of all. Then I was Labour got elected in 97. I was in the government for a spell. And then I lost my seat in 2005 to the Scottish Nationalists up in Scotland. Before that, I was an academic. I didn't want to go back to academia after I lost my seat. So I wanted to do something more practical, useful, and business directed, but that would be of benefit to the community as well, to the islands that I represented. So I knew exactly what I wanted to do as soon as I lost, and that was the very same month I held the first public meeting to start the Point and Sandwick project, which was to develop a community-owned wind farm on the island of Lewis.
That's brilliant, thank you. And that is exactly what I want to talk to you about, and beautifully leads me into my next question. So for me, the project and the trust is a true community project. It benefits the community. I know you, as you just said there, you were one of the founders and you're still an operational director. And I think the Point and Sandwick Trust is the largest community wind farm in the UK, if I'm right. Would you like to just give me an overview or just tell me a bit about how that works as a true community project?
Well, just to say, yes, we are the largest community-owned wind farm. We're 9 megawatts, and that's just 3 turbines. They were the biggest turbines you could get at the time, and I did that on purpose because I wanted to build the biggest I could, in order to demonstrate that community-owned energy can be done at scale. It doesn't need to be just, a turbine attached to the side of a community hall or a couple of solar panels on the school or something. You can do it at proper commercial scale. So, but because of grid constraints out in the islands, the Outer Hebrides, the 9 megawatts was all I could install. But it, as you will know, Russell, and as anybody who's listening who's ever been to the Outer Hebrides will know, the wind yield, the wind capacity is very high. So those 9 megawatt turbines, they're working quite hard and they produce a lot of power. In terms of what makes it a community project, that's actually a very important question, because as the UK government now and GB Energy now are focusing quite a lot on encouraging community energy. Ed Miliband has said he wants 8 gigawatts by, I think it's 2035 or something. And we're starting off from a position of about 200 megawatts at the moment. So that's a long way to go. But there is this new kind of momentum and focus. And one of the things that has to be worked out is, well, what is community energy? And there's different models that have evolved in Scotland and England. In England, community energy companies tend to be more structured as cooperatives sometimes, or as community interest companies. And as such, they tend also to have a kind of more restricted membership. You know, they look to fundraise from within their members as well as from supporters. And whereas in Scotland, the companies tend to be built around the existing model in Scotland, which is of charitable development trusts that are cover a specific area. And that's almost the first thing. The hardest, most difficult thing in the whole sequence is deciding what area is going to benefit from this kind of approach and setting your spatial boundaries. Once you've got them, then the principles are that everybody, you have to be inclusive and democratically run, so that everybody within the spatial area you've defined is eligible to become a member free of charge. So any registered elector in that area, for example, can become a member free of charge, and they elect the board of the charitable trust. So it's fully democratically accountable and run and inclusive of everybody in the area. So that tends to be the Scottish model. And we tend to be quite protective of it. And if you've got that, then you know you've got to kind of. I mean, the thing you've got to do with a wind farm is appreciate that it's a very long-term investment. So a wind farm will be working for 25 years, and if you're lucky, you can then recycle it, repower it, and get it going for another 25 years. So, you know, the original founders will have long gone, probably by the end of the first 25 years, far less by the, you know, the second sequence. So you've got to set it up in a way that is both open and flexible as to what you want to do with the profit you generate. You know, what, you know, you don't restrict yourself to say it's only education, it's only training young people, it's only kind of, you know, environmentally friendly stuff or whatever. You've got to sort of be open-ended because you don't know what is going to be a community priority in the future. But you've also got to make it at the same time such that it's not going to get diverted from its true community mission, you know, to benefit the community. And so by making it a charity, you have to lock that in, but even more so by making it open to everybody and democratically accountable and run, then you lock that in long term as well. It is one of the big issues at the moment as you get pressure to provide various kinds of, you know, help and support for community groups want to develop community energy is that, well, is it really a community group? Is it somebody who's trying to game the rules, game the system, as it were? So by having it set up in the Scottish model, you've got a pretty much foolproof that it's going to be always inclusive, democratic, and representing that community area.
Yeah. And it's like you say, it's different to the model of, you know, oh, we're going to build a wind farm and we're going to give something to the local community. But this is a commercial model where actually we're putting something into the community. As you said, the charitable structure, and of course, then everything's locked in. The governance is kind of very heavily prescribed, and you know, it's got to be and the bit I think I'd not appreciated, which you've covered, is just how involved the local people can be. They all have the right to be involved, and they all have the right. And yet, I know that you run it. You run it, if you will, on the commercialization side in a very commercial way. You run it, I know, to get the most out of the power you generate and you know, the regos and rocks and everything else you can get. So I know that you on the one hand you've got that very that commercial focus at scale, as you said, it's big. But actually, what's happening with that is it's then returned for the community's own priorities, which, again, I have to be careful because I'll turn into a complete fan. But, that's what I love about this. And I think that, if it's okay with my next question, is I've sort of seen, by following the newsletter, some of the great things you've done, but it's not. Without being funny, they're not just small things. It's not like, well, we were just going to replace this or buy the local football team some shirts or something. You've been able to make some really big, to do some really big things in the community. Can I ask you about some of those, and maybe if you've got any kind of favourites for those things that you've done over the years?
Yes, I should say beforehand that we've got two golden rules we try to follow. One is that we don't fund stuff that should be done by local or central government. Yeah,
Yep.
The whole point of this is to do stuff that's additional.
Yeah.
And represents what the community wants. And we're not stepping in to fill the gaps that might be opening up because there's public spending cuts or whatever. That's not our job. We're not a kind of, patchwork,
Yeah.
repair job. And secondly, we don't give money to individuals. We give money to projects and organizations in the community that want to do something to benefit the community, either immediately or as a legacy project. So we try not to run these projects ourselves. We try to encourage the community to come up with projects. If they've got a good idea, organize themselves into a suitable vehicle, and then we'll fund that project or that organization. So that keeps, if you just end up running everything, instead of stimulating community initiative, you suck it into you become the new center where everything gets sucked in. So these are,
I suppose, Calum,
kind of.
Sorry, I was going to say, I suppose by doing that, for example, if you said, look, set up an organization, and maybe that in itself could be a charity or, whatever, that's also going to be governed, which means you can be comfortable that money and the way that organization works is properly governed as well.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And that's something we look at, and we help them. We've got a couple of people we employ to help people develop their ideas. So one person will focus on helping them get their articles and MEM and the Constitution and charity registration right. Another will help them on practical aspects. He's an ex-engineer, basically, on delivering their project. So we can provide that kind of help, but rely on people to organize themselves and really push it forward and try to harness their own enthusiasm and initiative to see it through. And the other benefit from doing it this way is that we also encourage them and help them apply for other kinds of funding. So they're not just reliant 100% on us, but rather they can go out and try to access all the funding that any normal community initiative or charity could try to access. And that way, we aim to lever in additional money into our area, not just the money we're generating from wind farm. We can lever in new money as well, so make it all go further. So that's the kind of general approach we're trying to adopt. As you say, there's a wide range of stuff that we do. We support the local hospice, for example, and I should, in mentioning the local hospice, it's a Western Isles, a Hebrides-wide hospice. It's not just for the communities that have got the wind farm. So we do invest in things that have a wider benefit and not just the people involved in the wind farm area. Another project like that is we're doing a kind of native tree planting projects, working with local crofters in the islands, and doing it in a way that no big, charity or state organization could do. Woodland Trust, for example, they can't really do it because we work with each individual crofter in their small holdings, and we help them sort of develop a native woodland, and bit by bit, like a mosaic, eventually you will get a landscape effect, but it's very itsy bitsy initially. And as I say, most state organizations, the Forestry Commission wouldn't be bothered with that kind of thing, etc. I know because I used to be on the Forestry Commission, and I tried to get them into this, and they said, no, it has to be a certain scale to interest us.
Yeah.
So we're doing that across the islands, and that'll, got a target of 1 million trees by 2030. We're not going to hit it by 2030, but certainly by 2035, we'll hit it. So that'll have a big impact, and will be transformative for a lot of the villages. Again, if anybody's visited the Western Isles, they'll know that it needs some native trees in there. It's quite wind blasted and windswept at the moment in appearance. And there's various other projects. We help local, a variety of different local organizations doing charitable work with young people, old people, sports, education, etc. We're now converting a Victorian mill, an old mill that finally closed in the 70s. But we're restoring it now, and we'll be reopening it this summer, not just as a kind of restored mill, but as a kind of centre of crofting heritage, to show how crofting villages used to operate and work. People on the way the agriculture practices, obviously, but also things like cutting peat, the fishing that used to do. Crofting was a variety of different occupations and income streams that kept households alive. So it's to paint a picture of that kind of lifestyle. That'll be in that new visitor centre. So there is a kind of wide variety of stuff we're doing. I could prattle on endlessly, but
no, I appreciate it, and I'd encourage people to go and have a look at the website and to see, because there's a lot of stuff on there. And I say you get the newsletter and see what goes on. So no, thanks for sharing those. If I may, I wonder if you could just maybe give us all a couple of words about maybe some of the challenges you faced about setting up and running a project like this, and how you maybe overcome those.
Yeah, well, the biggest challenge, you can say there's different challenges. There's funding, there's getting the legal rights to build, there's identifying the site in the first place, there's environmental issues that commit to planning. It's typically, it takes 10 years from having the light bulb idea of a wind farm would be good in that place to actually switching it on. And that's not just because we're a community organization. That is a standard timeline that the industry faces. I'm now currently working on a battery project. So it'll be 25 megawatt grid supporting battery, which will be the first community such battery.
Another first, I love it.
And we started that. I started that in 20. This is Point and Sandwick as well, the same organization. In 2019, I had the first discussion. So we're only 7 years in. Yeah. I'm hoping to have it by I'm not going to be able to do it by next year, but by 2028. I've got gate 2 status now, which is a very, very, that's gold.
Oh, that is good. So. Yeah. Oh, congratulations. And I love it because actually, knowing that area, that battery will be incredibly helpful for keeping renewable projects running, and not reliant on heavy oil generation and other things as well. So that's really good. No, thanks. So I also, like I said, I also know you've been involved in Community Energy Scotland. So not only working with Point and Sandwick, but actually trying to push that out wider and get more involvement. Do you want to tell me a little bit? Could you tell me a little bit more about that?
Yeah. Well, the community energy sector kind of, grew quite a lot about the time when we were getting developed, because you had ROCs available and you had a kind of not permissive, but encouraging environment from government. But then when ROCs dried up, all onshore development dried up. And now it's all kind of cranking back into life again. But it still needs a bit of a push. So I joined Community Energy Scotland. It's a kind of represents all the community energy organisations or people interested in community energy across Scotland. There's about 450 organisations who are members, and we're trying to sort of get the government, both in Scotland and in the UK, working with our partners in Community Energy England and Community Energy Wales, working all together to try to get the UK government as well to put forward policies that would grow the sector in the way that they themselves said they want to see it grow. I mean, my own vision is that there's no reason why we can't be one day like Denmark, which has half the turbines. If ever you go to Denmark, I'm sure you've been a lot of times in the course of your work over the years, then you know there's probably nowhere in Europe that's got more turbines sticking out of the ground than in Denmark per hectare.
Yeah.
But half of these are community owned. I mean, Denmark has always taken this kind of community-owned approach. Even when you fly into Copenhagen and you see these turbines out in the water, these are community-owned as well.
Wow.
You know, sometimes by cooperatives, sometimes by municipal authorities, but all community-owned. And so Denmark have demonstrated it can be done. One of the ways they do it is by where they have private developments happening, they require them to offer 20% of the development for sale to the local community. So communities can organise as cooperatives, whatever, or the municipalities can buy 20% of any private development from at the very outset. So these are the policies they've deployed. It's had that wonderful effect of half the energy is community owned in Denmark, and that hugely benefits local economies and the national economy as well, because that money, that profit, gets retained and spent locally. A very different picture in the UK, where I think it's probably 1% rather than 50% that's community owned. And as you know, by far the largest proportion of developments in the UK, both in Scotland and UK wide, are owned by non-UK companies. Quite often they're state-owned companies. And so you have this irony that the profits being generated basically from government support, because none of the wind farms will be making money without government support up to this point, and probably for some time to come as well. You need price support of one kind or another. If it's not ROCs, it's CFDs. So all that support, which is now switching from being consumer funded, which it has been up to now, by a levy, that support, that government support, is now switching to being taxpayer funded. The government is doing that now in order to reduce people's bills. But that makes it even more ridiculous to my mind that taxpayer support is just going straight out of the UK into, the French government or, Scandinavian government. It doesn't make any sense when you can do it differently, and we can do it differently. And so that's what I'm working on at the moment, working with Community Energy Scotland, talking to UK government and Scottish government about how they can really grow the community energy sector.
That's brilliant. And to be fair, I would agree with you about changes needed to support the community energy sector, because I actually did some work in 2024 and we put a white paper together. It was about the UK market more generally, but part of that was about how you encourage community schemes better right across the piece, because sometimes I've seen them where perhaps they're smaller, and you see smaller viable projects who potentially have everything they need. They even have an off-taker, but because of the structure of the UK market, there are things that just stop it working. Not even the things that you've had. You talked about like how you set it up, but it's like, yes, we can get it all set up. They can do that. We can take the power, but because of the way that everything's working, whether it's balancing or grid or the way that suppliers are set up and all sorts of things, just stops it. And I completely agree with you. I think there are lots of things that we could do that don't that don't require the taxpayer to fund things that would work really well, or might require minimal taxpayer support. For example, things like credit guarantees. that, if the project is successful, which likely it will be, doesn't cost anybody anything, but having that guarantee means that it can get funded and it can get done. As simple things
Yes.
like that don't cost us in any of our tax money, and
Yeah.
all of that, a lot of that money then, well, all that money stays local, if you know what I mean. So
Yeah.
no, I think that's great.
I
I'm
agree 100% that you don't need any more subsidy to be given to communities as compared to a corporate, regular, standard, conventional development.
yeah,
And in our case, we did get loans from Scottish government as part of our development phase, to do environmental studies and employ lawyers and all the rest of it. But as soon as we reached financial close, we paid those loans back.
back,
So it's a revolving fund,
yeah,
and so you don't need to be actually spending extra taxpayers' money to to grow the community energy sector. You can do it by ways that doesn't cost the taxpayer anything, but will actually benefit the taxpayer in the long run by producing employment and economic growth in local economies and across the piece across the country as well.
yeah.
I mean,
No, that
if we had the Danish situation of 50% of the wind farms in the UK being community owned, it'd just be transformative in terms of its economic impact of the industry upon local economies and upon the national economy as well. So that's to me what we should be aiming for.
No, I love it. There's definitely love in the room for community projects. I would totally agree. So on that, I think to wrap it up, if someone said to me, if we were talking and someone said to me, "Oh, I'm thinking about a community project. I don't know if I should look at it or not," I would jump up and down and say, "Yes, yes, yes, you should." But I've never done it. You've done it. Would you have any advice for someone thinking, I might do something similar?
Uh, yes, I would encourage them. Absolutely, I would say you'll find few things as rewarding and satisfying as pursuing this kind of project, working it, and then seeing it appear out of the ground, and then seeing it generate money that'll last for decades, going back into your local community, your local area. Um, and my advice would be is to always keep inform and consult with the communities. Use local, community councils, as in Scotland, or parish councils, as in England, or local development trusts, or other NGO groups that are locally active, and build up that kind of understanding, which you'll have to keep repeating. It's not an easy, it's not an easy subject. And the biggest thing you have to convey to them is not actually knowledge, but it's confidence that they can do it. It's just encouragement and confidence. And if you do that, as I say, there are very, very few things that are as rewarding. I would also just make the point that it's not some mad Marxist, socialist utopian thing. It is running a company, but just your shareholders are different. Instead of the shareholders being, kind of private shareholders or some equity guy who's given you a leg up, but wants a leg, two legs back from you, then it's your own community of the shareholders, and it's really, really rewarding. You can be an entrepreneur. You have to be an entrepreneur to develop a wind farm, but you've also get this warm glow from helping the community as well. And the final thing is, people who have come from working in the private sector are very well equipped, because a community wind farm only succeeds. It's community owned, but it only succeeds if it works with a whole supply chain of people and companies in the private sector. And so people with that kind of background are very, very well equipped to help a community project off the ground. If you come from the private sector and you think, well, I haven't done any community work or charity work before, I'm not really sort of this kind of guy, don't worry. Your skills will be used and needed in developing the project.
I have to say, I think that's a really good point. I would say when I first obviously found out about Trust and came to meet you all those years ago, I thought I'd be very daunted if someone said, "Can you build a 9 megawatt project and do it on a community basis?" And when I met everyone at the trust and you and everyone, that's the thing that struck me was exactly what you said. They were a whole bunch of really lovely and I'd say ordinary, but actually in some ways extraordinary people, but ordinary people who were doing what they did best in the local community around that, around the trust and around the wind farm. And I think that was when I realized, like, actually you genuinely, people can do that. Yes, it takes the right advice and everything else. So no, that's brilliant. Callum, I have really, as always, I know we haven't talked for a long time, but I really enjoyed talking with you today, and I massively appreciate you coming on. So a huge thank you for joining me.
Thanks very much, and it's great to have a catch up. Thank you.